My name's Evan from Lonely Stoner Podcast, and just moments ago, Oleksandr Usyk knocked out Daniel Dubois in the 5th round of their main event fight at Wembley Arena, July 18th. And wow, what a performance from Usyk. You know, there was a lot of people coming into this fight thinking that, you know, Dubois was gonna have success. He was gonna catch him. Usyk's the much older man. You know, it was a lot of the narratives that were going into their first fight. And of course, that low blow, like me and my co-host Seth discussed on the podcast not too long ago, that low blow kind of created a cloud of controversy that shouldn't have really existed because Usyk put it on him in that fight. And this fight further just proves how good Usyk is, because in the first 4 rounds, he was walking Dubois onto punches. Dubois was pressuring heavy, trying to get Usyk in the corner, and Usyk was just constantly circling away from that big right hand, which Dubois was looking to land. So I think eventually in this fight, Dubois kind of got frustrated, really started dropping his hands, marching forward, and he wasn't being as defensively responsible, and Usyk caught him badly. He caught him twice. He caught him in the 5th round, put him down. It was kind of like a flash knockdown. Dubois got back up, and about 20 to 30 seconds later, maybe even a little bit less, he put him down again really badly, and then knocked him out. Fantastic performance from Usyk. Now 24-0, I believe. He's beaten Fury twice, he's beaten AJ twice, he's beaten Dubois twice. So he's beaten all of the top guys in his weight class. He's now 2 times undisputed champion at heavyweight, and of course was undisputed champion at cruiserweight. In my opinion, and you know, as I'm sure my co-host Seth would tell you, that this man has to be the modern heavyweight GOAT. And as we've discussed, you know, you have the Furies, the Lennox Lewises, the Klitschko's, but you look at these guys and they have things you can pick at. They have losses. You know, Usyk doesn't have any of this. He doesn't have losses. He's undisputed in multiple weight classes, cruiserweight and heavyweight. And of course, you know, heavyweight isn't the most stacked division right now. You don't have, like, for example, Moses Otoma. He's fighting Dillian White already, and he's like 20 years old. So that's quite crazy. So I think that kind of does go to show how weak heavyweight is. However, this shouldn't take away from what Usyk is doing at all, because the man's 38 years old. A man 11 years younger than him, 27-year-old Daniel Dubois, getting knocked out in the 5th round badly. You know, he wasn't out cold, but he got put down and he couldn't get back up. Simple as that. You know, I'm sure Dubois will grow, because he's only 27 years old. You know, he's probably not even come into his athletic prime yet. You know, that usually, for a bigger guy as well, that usually being in the early to mid 30s. And of course, he's 27 years old, like I said. So I do see Dubois, even, you know, with 3 losses on his record, to getting finished twice by Usyk now. It's not the best look, but you know, you put him away for a bit, you let him get some more wins. You know, I'm not sure what Usyk is going to do next. After the fight, in the in-ring interview, he called out Fury's name, he called out Joshua's name, he called out Joseph Parker's name. For me, the Joseph Parker fight is the fight that makes sense, because he's interim champion of one of the governing bodies. I'm not sure, I can't remember which one, but that's the fight that makes sense. Joseph Parker seems to be the second, other than Dubois, kind of seems to be the second best heavyweight right now. So that fight, they should definitely be looking to make that fight happen. But Usyk said he's going to have some time. You know, they might, if that fight doesn't get made quick enough, or if there is another contender for one of the other governing bodies, that fight might not be for undisputed when it eventually happens, if it happens. However, you know, that's probably what we should be looking at next. You know, Joseph Parker's earned his shot at Usyk and at those heavyweight titles. And in terms of, you know, I was saying to my co-host Seth not long ago, during this fight, that, you know, you can really make, you know, Usyk is the modern heavyweight GOAT, in my opinion, you know, going like 2000 plus afterwards, and he's got to be on the Mount Rushmore for heavyweights of all time. You know, 4 guys, if you want to say Mike Tyson and Ali are on there, then yeah, maybe a Klitschko, maybe a Fury, maybe a Lennox Lewis. But then Usyk is definitely on there. Multiple time undisputed champion at heavyweight. Nobody is doing what he's doing. And he's making it look easy as well. He's not having extremely close fights or fights that make you doubt him. He's comfortably beating all of the top contenders at heavyweight. And in my opinion, it does help that he did move up from cruiserweight, because you're facing faster guys down there, probably slightly more skillful guys down there. So when you come up, the one thing going up from cruiserweight to heavyweight is the punching power, right? If he gets bombed on by these heavyweights, then it's not going to be fun for him. But if he's not getting hit anyway, that doesn't really matter. So from his perspective, he's going up a weight class where the fighters are going to be slower, less technical, more powerful, yes, but he's not getting hit anyways. So it doesn't really matter to him. So it kind of makes sense why he's been able to go up and just dominate so easily at heavyweight. Well, it does not make sense, but you can see it. And I guess the Fury fights are really where how good he is comes into play, because a guy like Dubois and a guy like AJ, you can say, oh, those guys are just power punchers, they're slow, this and that, even though they're not necessarily just that, but the argument can be made, right? However, Fury, he's not a power puncher, he's a technical, very technical puncher, and he's much bigger than Usyk as well. Big weight advantage, big height advantage. So any reason why any hole you could try and find to poke at with Usyk, it simply doesn't exist. In my opinion, if you want to look at heavyweight GOAT, and I'm not the most educated guy, and I know a lot of these guys will be saying, oh, the Rocky Marcianos, the old guys from the 40s and 50s. I'm not watching fights from the 40s and 50s, right? Like, I'm just not doing that. Do what you like, and I know the boxing purists will hate me for saying that, but for me, I'm looking like 80s onwards, right? I mean, all respect to Ali, but from a boxing perspective, from a resume perspective, from a boxing and skill perspective, he doesn't hold a candle to Usyk. And, if you want to say that Ali is your heavyweight GOAT for reasons that aren't to do with his skill set and more for what he did in his life and for boxing, then if that's your argument, then okay, I can deal with that. Mike Tyson has got too much of a tainted record. Yes, one of the most iconic boxers ever, and if you were to say to any person, who isn't familiar with boxing, name a boxer, Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali would be the ones they would probably name. So in terms of being iconic and what they did for boxing outside of the ring, I understand that. But in terms of their resume, their skill set, nobody's ever looked as good as Usyk has and done it as easily as he has. And even those guys back then weren't just beating every single world champ they fought. So, for me, it's wild what he's doing to this heavyweight division, and he's just clearing it out. And if he goes and beats Joseph Parker, who's interim champion, then there is legitimately nothing left for him, unless they're gonna super push Moses Atama for a world title fight against Usyk at the age of would be around 21 or 22 years old. Which is just quite absurd to me, because that would more speak to how shallow that heavyweight division is, in combination with how much Usyk has cleared it out. But, man, all props to Usyk. The guy just seems to get better with every fight. He's more and more impressive every time I watch him box. And it's just really, I look forward to it every time he fights. I really, really like Usyk. He's one of my favourite boxers. Man, it's just these Eastern European boxers, they got something else, like these Ukrainian, Kazakhstan type boxers. These guys are just, they got something else, man. They got something else. I mean, it helps boxing from that age, you're out the womb and you're boxing. So, obviously that helps. But also, it's their style as well. It's the fact that they have so many, I think Usyk had like over 300 amateur fights. So when you're having that much, as me and Seth have said before on the podcast, you can spar as much as you like, but the fight is where you get your real XP. So having that many amateur fights, it can only increase that skill set even more, and we can see that in what Usyk is doing to these heavyweights. Really, really phenomenal, amazing fundamentals. Just that's something that my co-host Seth said to me. Amazing fundamentals, and I was thinking the same thing. I was like, wow, this guy is just incredible. enough glaze. I'll leave it there. I've been Evan from Lone Sun Podcast. Peace.